All right. The president of COP28 has dismissed allegations that he is a climate denialist. Sultan Al Jaber has, of course, come under fire after, at the summit, allegedly speaking about just the validity of fossil fuels contributing to climate change. But let's, of course, continue looking at some of the discussions coming out of COP28. So what the UN doesn't know is that SA is great at making plans and promises, but bad in implementing them. That's the view of Energy Analyst Adil Nchabeleng, commenting on South Africa being lauded by UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres for being the only country that had submitted a plan to the UN Intergovernmental Panel on climate change to end the use of coal and fossil fuels. Well, as COP28 continues in Dubai, the focus, of course, is very much on whether or not to phase out the use of fossil fuels. Let's get some more analysis now. For that, we're joined by energy analyst Mr. Adil Nchabeleng. Mr. Nchabeleng, a good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us. So you start off this piece, in this opinion piece that you've written in this column, by essentially saying, well, at COP28, President Cyril Ramaphosa had a meeting with UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres and was lauded for plans that we've made to transition to greener energy. What did you make of that?
Look, yes, I think the Secretary-General lauded South Africa for being the first country and the only country for having submitted plans for just energy transition, which means to completely phase out the use of fossil fuels as well as moving away from coal. And it was a huge moment, and the president was extremely impressed and pleased. But, in the piece, I open it up by saying that what the UN doesn't know is that South Africa is brilliant at plans, but it's very poor at implementing any of the plans. Given the fact that when you come back home, the president knows very well that there is a stern and a fierce opposition towards the closing down of coal-fired power stations, the closing down of coal in terms of mining of coal in South Africa. And top of it, the fact that the communities are affected. I mean, we had an incredible opposition and as well as a pushback from the Komati power station closure, whereby community overnight, everything was stopped and they were promised that there will be jobs which never actually came through, and they were told that they will be transitioning into green renewable energy, which didn't happen. So these promises are getting to that point of being really nonsensical, because you make promises on basis knowing fully well that on the ground there is no capacity. The president, for instance, of COP28, when he spoke about the Sultan, when he spoke about, the fact that he is having a problem with the fact that the minute we start talking about removing fossil fuel and taking away coal, you're going to stop the world's development and we're going to send us all into the cave areas. And then a lot of people took it very bad, because everybody wants to hear the nice story about transitioning, but they don't want to hear the reality that we live in a world that is totally dependent on fossil fuels, and to move away from fossil fuels, it will take a minimum of 100 years to perfect the transition, because the technology is not yet ready to do or find a way of adapting towards a net zero emissions environment.
Yeah, but then why make those commitments? I mean, that's going to be the big question, right? Where you've got the UN Secretary-General then saying, well, South Africa's well on its way to a just energy transition. Why then? I mean, are we posturing when we get to COP28? Is that the real challenge here?
Look, South Africa wants to be seen as a cheerleader, one of the best in the class in terms of the good children in the class and the school, and they're doing exactly what we know South Africans do very well. They will chant the success story, but back home the reality is totally different. Nobody in South Africa is actually agreeing to the closing down of any power station. Nobody's agreeing to the crisis we have of energy. Nobody is agreeing to the ending of fossil fuels, because there is no any other substitute technology that is available right now that is used in order to actually fill in the gap of current, space that has been created. So we're becoming a global clown, because we make all these promises, but when it comes to reality, we are unable to implement on it. And the worst part of it is everybody who's going to COP28 and this climate-related summits are all hypocrites. I mean, over 1,000 jets flew in. I'm talking about private jets. And there was over 80,000 people who attended the COP28 this year in Dubai. In terms of the conference itself, the level and contribution of carbon emission for that one single trip and day, for people to go and talk about the climate crisis, which they are creating on a daily level. None of these European countries are reducing their emissions. None of the developed countries are agreeing, even at the COP current summit, to reduce their contribution towards emissions. Instead, Africa and Africans are told that they must stop their development and they must stop using any of the fossil fuel, gas, oil, they must stop using coal, they must stop using steel, they must not produce cement, because all of it crosses emissions and they cross global climate crisis. So we were given a hypocritical position. Europe is not prepared to remove any of the advantages and privileges that they're enjoying relating to the use of fossil fuel. But Africa must be imposed, and we are told we cannot even venture into the arena of exploring net zero technologies like nuclear, as well as going into hella coal, which is reduction of emissions coming out of the coal power station using high efficiency, low emission technology.
Well, okay, so I mean, you've called it in your piece the island of luxury. COP28, the island of luxury, and you continue to say, you know, the delegates there are flown in like celebrities. I almost want to read a little bit from it. They fly in like celebrities in jets, first class and business class tickets to the events. They're all chauffeured in style and stay at luxurious hotels. There is an endless supply of anything they desire. And then, of course, you go on to talk about the discussions. But that certainly is one part of the argument when you say even all these resources are contributing somewhat to carbon emissions. But we as South Africa need to come out of COP28 with a clear direction. What should that look like for South Africa? You've got, of course, the Minister of Energy and Mineral Resources, Gwede Mantashe, taking part in some of the proceedings today at COP28 in Dubai. What should our outcome be coming out of this conference?
I think the outcome, the minister has already set the tone when he made an interview yesterday on his arrival. He stated it very categorically clear that the so-called just energy transition was very unjust when it came to South Africa. Look at the catastrophe that was created when Komati power station was actually shut down. The entire town came to almost a standstill. So his position is very clear. I think South Africa should come out with a negotiated settlement to say, listen, we will, like countries like China and many other developing European countries, reduce the level of emissions. But stopping coal, stopping fossil fuel is impossible. Find technology to reduce the emissions, like I've already spoken. On your coal power stations, install what we call HELE technology, which is high efficiency, low emissions technology that reduces the emissions and the greenhouse gases. You have already now achieved one great objective. And over the next coming 30 to 50 years, you quietly transition and you can use your nuclear power station technology, which you need to build. And you can use the technology of HELE to make sure that the coal that you utilize is clean enough and it's environmentally acceptable at an emissions level. Those are the commitments that are agreeable. Nobody is against the fact that industries must continue doing as they wish and pollute and create crisis. But the fact that we must be told that we must stop our development, it's totally unacceptable.
Yeah. All right, let's leave it there. Thank you so much for your time. We do appreciate it that there's Energy Analyst Adil Nchabeleng speaking to us.